Hello, I'm Mary, and I'm really excited to be talking to Della Galton today. I'm a writer as well, and I write whodunit type books. So we're going to go into a slightly different world today with Della. We were trying to work out just before we came on how many of these chats we've done, and I think we've gone to about our 8th now by the time we've gone back and forth to each other. Della's written 17 books, I think it is now, Della. And she also teaches creative writing. So remember that if you're going to be asking any questions, she knows all the answers to creative writing. So that's just brilliant. So today's book, we're talking about Rainbows Over Puddleduck Farm, which is the second in a series about Phoebe, a vet, working in the New Forest. And I am absolutely loving this. I grew up reading James Herriot. So I love all vet books like this. And this is like a modern James Herriot with romance thrown in. It's just gorgeous, but so much about animals, which is just lovely. So the first book I think was called Coming Home to Puddleduck Farm, and this is called Rainbows Over Puddleduck Farm, which I think you see little ducks down the bottom, and they're just holding up the book. Now, only this morning I was looking at the blog of Anne Williams, a wonderful blogger, and I'm going to read, just to make Della blush, some of Anne's review this morning because it's just gorgeous. Della Galton is such an excellent storyteller, perfectly balancing warmth and lightness with a few considerable heavier themes. And this book made me feel entirely invested in her very real characters and keen to see what she takes on next, which is just lovely. And then I could have read lots of lovely reviews. So, I mean, it was such a good day. Well done yesterday, Della. What a wonderful publication day.
Thanks.
Went well.
Thank you, Mary.
So now, would you like to start off by telling us a bit about the book?
Suddenly it all goes out of my head. I think, what is it about?
Well, tell us a bit about Phoebe.
Yeah. Oh, and hello. Oh, hello, Anne and Jenny and Jessica and Jan and Fiona. It's really nice that you're here. It's always nice to know someone's watching, I think. But yes, the book it's about Phoebe. Phoebe is a vet. She started her career in London, and that's in book 1. And then she comes back down to the New Forest, which was where she was brought up. And she starts a practice of her own. This is a lifelong dream on her grandmother, Maggie Crowther's farm, which is Puddleduck Farm. Maggie Crowther is a bit of one of my favourite characters, actually.
She's great, yeah.
Eccentric. Love her, feisty, chases people off of her farm with baseball bats, that kind of thing. And I love women like that. And but Phoebe is strong, quite tender-hearted, actually, and that's really coming out. I'm writing a third book at the moment, and it's really coming out in that one. Phoebe is who I would have loved to have been. I wanted to be a vet when I was little, and I would have loved to have been Phoebe. If I had been a vet, I hope I would have been like her.
I think you would have, yeah. Oh, I mean, I think actually what you said just then about Maggie, I feel like she's getting softer, actually. I noticed she's calling Phoebe darling a few times, and I thought, yeah, that bond between them, now that Phoebe's moved in closer to her and everything, is getting stronger, isn't it?
Yes, and there's a reason she's getting softer. I don't want to do spoilers, but there is a reason she's getting softer. And yes, I'm aware of that too. And I actually caught her being incredibly, saying something incredibly soft in the book I've just written, actually. So I have to watch that, because she's always been, I mean, she used to run a dairy farm on Puddleduck, and she's always been quite a tough old bird, actually. So I'll have to watch myself. It's interesting.
There's that wonderful bit when she takes over the reception in the vets, and you really see the older Maggie there. I mean, it's a scream, honestly. Because I've been to vets lots with my animals, and she's just a one-off as a receptionist. She's brilliant. So I'll just say a quick hello to everybody, to Fiona, Jan, Jessica, Jennifer, Anne, Fiona. Got 3 Fionas. No, I'm sorry, Fiona Jenkins, you're down here twice, yeah. And Kim, hello everybody, lovely to see you all. So now the setting of the New Forest, I know it from, because I live on the Isle of Wight, so sometimes we go down to Bristol through the New Forest, and I mean, what a fabulous place. So why choose the New Forest?
Because I love it. I love it too, actually. When I grew up in Bournemouth, and I've said this before, but my mum said we were incredibly lucky because we had the sea on one side of us and the New Forest on the other. And that is so true. And I lived, my mum lives by the sea. She had a hotel for 25 years and she still lives there. It's not a hotel anymore, it's a flat. I'll just point that out. But the New Forest, I actually was lucky enough to live there for a while too, not that long, right on the edge near Fordingbridge. And so I guess I've used that as an inspiration, that's for sure. We spent a lot of time in the New Forest when I was a child, picnics, that kind of thing. And I've ridden in the New Forest, I've ridden horses. I just love it. I personally, my mum is the sea and I'm the forest. So although I wrote a lot of books set by the sea, if I could live anywhere, I'm the countryside. I'm a countryside girl. I don't know how that happened because I grew up in a town in Bournemouth, but the countryside is my spiritual home.
I just, for me personally, I go to the beach a lot here on the island, but if I need peace and I need quiet and calm, I go up onto the downs.
Yeah.
So I think maybe at heart I'm slightly more country than the sea. I don't know. I was reading through your reviews, and one of them was written by a vet who said that she was so pleased to read something so well researched. So tell me, I mean, because you're not a vet, are you? Have you ever been a vet? Because you know an awful lot about it.
I just hope I've got it right. No, that's one of the bits I've had to do a lot of research for. I have a vet, obviously, because I have dogs, lots of dogs and chickens. And I did approach them. And this is a really good thing to do. Obviously, I needed to do this. I couldn't have done it. I couldn't have written a book about being a vet. You can definitely write a book with a vet in it, but you can't write a book about being a vet unless you have a bit more insight. And so I spoke to my vet, Rhiann Rochford, her name is, and she's been amazingly helpful. Basically, I send her questions, and I don't know how she manages to do it, but she almost always seems to answer them straight away. So in this book, there's a story strand about lop-eared rabbits, and which, again, I don't know anything about that, but Rhiann does. Rhiann seems, everything I pick to write about, Rhiann seems to know a lot about it. It's brilliant.
Oh, that's wonderful.
She's brilliant.
I noticed that Jessica's just asked about research and said, what aspect of any of your books do you most enjoy researching? Was that one of your favourite bits about being a vet? Because you know it all, like even down to how the reception's organised, not just about dealing with the animals. It's you seem to have soaked it in somehow, so it comes over very naturally.
It's quite weird, actually, because yesterday I took a copy. Rhiann is in the acknowledgements of this book because we had a real life problem also that Rhiann sorted out last year. Now I'll tell you about that in a second. But I took a book down yesterday. I take her a signed copy and I dropped it off at reception. And the reception, my vet, which is in Shaftesbury, is exactly, I based the vets in Rainbows Over Puddleduck Farm exactly on my vets. It looks exactly the same. I took photographs of it all. I took photographs with their permission. I took photographs of the consulting rooms. And so my vets is that vets. When I'm writing about it, it's quite strange because when I then go into my vets, I feel like a scene has happened, even though it's only happened in my head. I feel like I'm in the same place of my book. It's bizarre situation. But last year, I had a real problem with one of my dogs. I thought Ella, my black and white dog, had this, she came in one day with a scratch on her nose. And I thought she'd been fighting, possibly with a rat or something in the garden. But I hadn't heard any altercation. And anyway, I didn't take much notice because it was a scratch on her nose. And then the next day, we were looking at this scratch, and it was a Friday when she came in. On the Saturday, my other half said, "Do you think that's looking worse?" And we had another look and it was worse than the day before.
Yeah.
So I took her to the vet, and the vet
Yeah.
said it wasn't Rianne at that time because it was a Saturday, she wasn't there. So I took her to an emergency vet, and that vet said, this isn't a scratch, this is something else. And they didn't know what it was. And over the next, I mean, by the 5th day, it kept spreading. And by the 5th day, it was completely a red, raw mass over her entire snout. It was absolutely horrifying. And she was in the vets having a biopsy under anaesthetic.
Yeah.
They thought it might be some really nasty illness called Alabama rot, which is fatal.
I read about that. Yeah.
And they didn't know what it was. They could not get to the bottom of what this was. And it was Rianne who did finally get to the bottom of it by going onto a forum of vets and putting photographs. And someone said to her, I know what that is, test for this. And it was an autoimmune disorder.
Oh.
And as soon as they knew that, they got steroids into her, and she was better, but almost as quickly as she'd gone downhill. It was so strange. So anyway, I digress, but
yeah,
that's not going to go into my book, that particular incident, because sometimes things are a little bit too close to home, I think. But there'll be elements that go in, and I think all writers find this. We tend to echo some of what reality is in our own novels, but some things are too close to home. So to answer Jessica's question, sorry, I got sidetracked. I do really enjoy the research, and they are going to let me, and I've done this before. I've been into a vet's before and watched operations.
Have you?
Yeah.
Wow.
I did make a bit of a spectacle of myself because I had to leave because I felt slightly lightheaded.
Yeah. But that's so this business with the rabbits now, I knew nothing. I kept looking up from the book. Well, I was having my Kindle actually, so I was looking up from my Kindle, telling my husband about it because we had a rabbit years ago, and I said, "Have you heard about this? Have you?" I didn't know anything about it. So, how did you find out about this awful thing that's happening with rabbits?
Well, there's I do touch on some issues, don't I? I think it's important I know I write rom-coms and sort of upbeat fiction, but it's important to have some serious aspects for me anyway. And the flat-faced rabbits, it's very similar to flat-faced dogs, where they can end up breathing difficulties. And also with rabbits, because of their teeth are supposed to grind down naturally, and if they're too flat-faced, they can't. So if the breeding is irresponsible and they're too much that way, they will always have to have their teeth ground down. There's lots of things I didn't know. I just started off on this research track thinking I don't really want to do dogs. I didn't even realize until I embarked on it that rabbits could have the same problem. You know, that flat-faced dogs can have breathing difficulties. Well, rabbits can too. Had no idea about that. And it went from there. So I kind of stumbled across that almost by mistake, and then ended up being in my book. And it was fascinating.
Well, you certainly go for it in it. I mean, you don't sort of beat about the bush. It becomes a really central sort of fighting point for Phoebe, really, doesn't it? And I think it's good because you've sort of taken an issue and dealt with it seriously. Like you have, there's one or two other sort of fairly heavier issues in the book as well. But there's also, I mean, like you're dealing with PTSD with Rufus, and is that something you researched as well?
Oh, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but I was diagnosed with PTSD myself. I'm not going to tell you what for.
No, you don't have to say any more than that. No.
But I knew you were going to ask me that, and I was diagnosed by a neurologist 7 years ago now, actually, and it was quite strange putting that in the novel. It was strangely cathartic, actually, but it's an issue that affects people, and I know that obviously we have this PTSD image of soldiers coming back from the war, but an awful lot of people have it from other things. So in a weird way, I enjoyed writing that bit, but that's because I'm distanced enough from it, I think. I mean, maybe it's just said, do you find it easier or harder to write about something that's affected you personally? It depends what it is.
Yeah.
I mean, that one, I like dark issues. I should be writing dark thrillers, I think, sometimes. But that one, it was dark. But it just
I think it's very good. Well, not that's maybe not that's the right word, but the fact that you gave this issue to somebody who from the outside would appear to have, he's young, good-looking chap, and with it well off. And I think it's I found it very moving, actually, that somebody who could appear have so much going for him has this, had this thing happen to him that's resulted in PTSD in his life. And I think you handle it really sensitively. I know that's a few of the darker, sort of more difficult issues, but I don't want to give the wrong impression to people, because this is actually, there's lots of shades of light and dark in the book, and there's lots of very funny bits as well. And I think one of the reviewers said the animals are the stars of the show. Have you got any animals in the book that you particularly like?
I like Saddam the cat. That sounds a bit odd. But he comes into all of the books so far.
Yeah.
The third one, and he's a terrorist. This cat, he terrorizes. I think in Rainbows, he terrorizes dogs. He chases after dogs, doesn't he?
Yes.
He's kind of slightly based on a cat that my mother once had, who was a black cat called Rambo.
Yeah.
He used to terrorize dogs and people, and so he's a little bit based on Rambo, although he's a different color. I love the animals bits, and I have so much experience across the years of animals. I used to work at an animal rescue place or volunteer.
Right.
That's where I get a lot of it from, to be honest. And yes, there's hopefully, I like the bits I really enjoy writing are the humorous bits. I just love. I make myself laugh.
Yes. I mean, there's some real classic bits when I won't spoil it, but it's when somebody brings in somebody for an examination, and it's sorry, I have to read it because I can't tell the story because it's spoiled, but it's very, very funny. And I think that's the life of a vet must be just like that. Actually, they must have some very funny bits and then some very difficult bits as well. And I think, well, maybe the whole of life is a bit like that, really. But now, a slightly different question here, because I've noticed on Facebook and around, there's a lot of talk at the moment about people valuing romantic stories and romantic books. And I watched the video with Amanda, who's the founder of Boldwood, talking to some people. Did the most wonderful talking about how important it is, and this is something that a lot of people are reading, and in the past maybe hasn't been as valued as other genres of literature. And I just wondered what your thoughts were on that, and why you think it is that this genre is so important to people.
Because life's so flaming depressing sometimes. No, I don't mean that life is, but I mean an awful lot of what's going on. If you read the news, I've got to the stage with the news these days where I read the headline, and sometimes I decide if I can face reading the rest, because there seems to be so much black, dark news. And I think we need fiction, escapist fiction, for that escape into it. I sometimes, if I'm going through a phase where I'm feeling a bit down, because we all go through phases or something's going on in my life, I want to read escapist fiction. I want to just bury myself in a really nice Jessica Redland, Sophie Kinsella, something that's going to take me away from all of the dark stuff that's going on. It's vital, I think.
Yes, I agree, actually. And I think, like in the evenings when I was reading yours, because I read when I go to bed, I'd be thinking, oh, thank goodness I can escape to the New Forest with Phoebe. And I think it's not just it's escaping, but also resolving things. And whereas the world can feel a bit out of control, to be honest, a lot of the time lately, when you get a book, because as we said, you don't just sort of completely do a sort of paint a rosy picture. You sort of look at difficult things, but you work them out and you resolve them. And I think that's what's so lovely about romantic fiction, in that issues get talked about and resolved. And I think that's just so lovely to read about. And especially when you have a good writer like yourself and other I read Jessica's and Joe's and other writers'
Oh,
old
yeah,
books,
Joe's
and I just love it because it takes me somewhere else. But it is actually helping me resolve things and feel that life can be controlled, and give you hope, I suppose. Really.
Yeah, I love your books, Mary. I find that I love reading your books, and I read your books in bed too. And I am not scared out of my wits, which is one
They're
of
not
the things,
scary. No.
your genre, but I am also totally fascinated and drawn in. So your genre is actually another one that's escapist fiction, cozy crime, isn't it? Because
Yeah, I think so.
we know that the baddie's going to get caught. We know
Yes.
that we're going to get the comeuppance.
I think it's about. I was only thinking as we were talking, although the genres may seem miles apart, in a sense, it's about resolving things and showing that right wins and love wins. I think I'm reading T.A. Williams, another Boldwood writer. He Murder in Tuscany, and again, you've got the beautiful setting, but you have got a murder, but things are resolved, and I think. And that's not a spoiler in a cozy crime. It's how things are resolved that's the interesting bit. But it's just, I think that it's part of the joys of reading, and you've got to hear from Jessica. Escapism is so valuable when a challenging storyline resonates with readers. It can be really cathartic too. I agree, Jessica. I think it's I think it's good for people sometimes to be able to read about something in a third person, somebody going through something that might feel a bit like what you're going through, and seeing them resolve it.
The resolution, interestingly, I mean, I've all of my life, it feels like, and I have been doing it a long time, I've been writing stories. And I always used to say to anyone wanting to write stories, and to my students, because I obviously teach, is that you have to start with a conflict. So there has to be trouble, there has to be something going on, there has to be a problem going on, because that's how I was taught, from my writing teachers. And at the end of it, though, it has to be resolved. And that's the difference between fiction and life, because in life, things don't get neatly resolved. But in fiction, they can be wonderfully neatly resolved. And I love that about it. It's much harder. It's really hard to resolve the ending of
I think
stories.
it's really hard to do in a credible way. And I think, but I think it's, that's what good writing is about, isn't it?
Yeah. And it's also good for us. I actually feel that across the years, I've had such a good time, like creating things and then resolving them. And then at the end of it, I always feel like there's something, I don't know, something is resolved in me somehow. It's an interesting process, writing, isn't it?
Yes, I think it is, actually. I think once you get lost in it, and actually that leads me to a question that I know you don't like, but what's your sort of favourite and least favourite bits of writing? I want you to tell me your favourite. What do you like about writing? Maybe you've just answered that one. I don't know.
I guess I do. I like being immersed in a totally other world. What I really like about it, and I know all writers feel like this, is when you're so deeply into the story that the hours are just flicking by, and occasionally you look up, and then it's daylight, and then it's dark, and you think, where did that time go? I've been writing something today. I've been writing rainbows. No, not rainbows. The other one I'm writing, the next one, the third one.
Yeah.
Oh my god, I'm surrounded by Phoebe and Sam and Rufus, but I've been writing a scene in the third book today, and it's a funny scene, and also I've been so enjoying myself. I'm in it. I'm somewhere else. I'm actually in the Rhinefield House Hotel in the New Forest. That's where it's set.
Lovely.
Which is a beautiful place, and I mean, perhaps the best bit of writing a book is having to go to places like that to do the research and eating cake.
Yeah. Oh, I see. There's a question here from somebody called Emily Grand, who's might actually be my daughter, and it says, "Do you prefer writing goodies or baddies?"
What a brilliant question! Baddies.
And she is in her 20s, so you can give an adult answer to that.
I love writing baddies. Doesn't everyone love writing baddies? Don't actors prefer playing baddies?
Yeah.
I mean, writing goodies is quite hard because it's hard not to make them too boring and a bit pious, I think.
Yeah.
writing baddies is brilliant. I've got quite a good baddie in Rainbows, actually. She's the irresponsible rabbit breeder.
Yes.
And she is horrible. And
isn't she? Yeah.
I based her on someone I actually once knew.
No.
Yes, but this was a long time ago, and this was someone who was a irresponsible dog breeder, as it happens.
No.
So I got involved with a case, and I got the
Yeah.
RSPCA involved, and it was this was a long time ago, 20 years ago maybe. She's probably dead now, this woman, because she was quite old then, but she was completely irresponsible. And my rabbit breeder is based on her. She got her comeuppance in my book.
I love that. Well, it's good. Now, I wondered it might be a good chat time to stop and just, could you sort of read us maybe the opening of your book? In previous chats we've had, we've always talked about how important in your opening chapters can be in hooking in your reader and things. So no pressure. I wondered if you'd like to read us just a bit from the beginning of Rainbows Over.
I will, thank you. I'll read you the first paragraph. It's interesting. I'm just looking at Jessica saying I love writing baddies, and Maddie saying I love writing baddies, and making sure they get their comeuppance.
Yeah.
Okay, this is the beginning. This is the opening paragraph of this one. I'll just read the opening paragraph because that's quite dramatic, actually. So I must do some of what I practice. I must practice some of what I preach. I mean,
that's good.
So, kneeling in the middle of a muddy field, up to her elbow inside a ewe, struggling to lamb, was not how Phoebe Dashwood had planned to spend this February Sunday morning. She was hot and panting, although she knew she couldn't compete with the mother who delivered 2 lambs already and was too exhausted to push out her third, which Phoebe had just discovered was stuck. So that's the opening paragraph. And funnily enough, the Yorkshire vet's got a lot to answer to.
Right.
The research for that was watching. It's amazing what you can find on YouTube.
Yeah.
So I watched the Yorkshire vet delivering. I think that was a lamb, because I've got a carving in one of them as well. I think that might be the one I'm writing now. Yeah. So yes, it was a lamb. It was definitely the Yorkshire vet, and that was lambs. Thanks, Fiona. I think I just But I'm hoping that that's enough of a hook to get you in. I mean, this book is about, yes, it is a rom-com, and there is romance, quite a bit of romance, and quite a bit of comedy, but there's quite a bit of vet too. And I don't know if we were talking about this earlier, or James Herriot. I grew up on James Herriot books too. You said that, didn't you, earlier?
Yeah. Now, actually, your opening paragraph there could be, because he actually opens one where he's giving birth, not giving birth. That'd be odd. He's helping a cow give birth, and it's a similar feel, really. And I remember when he talks about sheep, and when the lambing season sort of takes over his life, and then it sort of recedes, and it's just like every spring, really. Although it always seems to be incredibly cold when he's doing lambing.
I've got a top tip for when you do not do gory research on YouTube when you're eating your lunch. By the way.
No.
I was doing that. What was I on the other day? Oh yes, was it a C-section of a cow I was watching the other day, and it was like, oh, I should not be watching this over lunch. I should not.
Is that a taste of something in the next book then?
Oh, we'll be quiet about that because it might not make the final cut. Oh, that's
right. Okay. So now, as a teacher of creative writing, I thought I'd sort of ask you. We're sort of coming up to the last section of our chat now, about some writing tips, maybe. What writing tips? If somebody was wanting to start off writing a novel, what would some of your main tips be?
Well, funnily enough, one of these is this is probably mine. Write about something that you feel totally passionate about. I've got 3 really. Write about something you feel totally passionate about, because you're going to have to really care about something to get all the way through to the end to 80,000 words. So that's my. Yeah. in a way, that's a really, really important one. But going back a little bit from that, many years ago, before I wrote my first book that was published, actually, because my first book was published in 2006, I think, 5 maybe. Anyway, doesn't matter. Someone asked me that question because I was sitting there. I'd written loads of short stories. I'd had loads of short stories published. I'd had lots of serials published, and I was struggling to get a novel published. And I know that that might apply to other people. Who I'm not sure if it applies to anyone who's watching or if you're all experienced. But someone asked me, it was Anne Ashurst, who wrote as Sarah Craven. She was a Mills and Boon author, brilliantly clever Mills and Boon author. And she said, what do you feel passionately about, Della? And I said, animal welfare, interestingly. Funny what I've ended up writing.
Yeah.
But she said, if you want to write about animal welfare, write a brochure. And that really struck me. And then she said, never forget, we're in the business of entertainment. She said that. And so my first book was, funny enough, had elements of animal sanctuary in it. That was also set in an animal sanctuary. But I was careful that the romance took priority, because she was right. What she was saying was, don't go preaching.
Yeah.
Write something that's going to entertain people and entertain readers, because we're not here to preach. We're here to actually entertain. So that was one of the things. And then the third one, and this is not my tip, I can't remember where I heard this, but it's brilliant. Finish the flaming book.
Oh, yes.
Because otherwise it's useless. I mean, I have a few half-finished books, maybe three. Usually what happens, I don't know if this happens to anyone else, I've written like a number of words, 20,000 maybe, and let someone else read it, and then I've been put off, because I've once sent 20,000 words to a critique agency and was put off writing the rest. Oh. And I think that's probably a really bad move. You definitely need to write, don't show anyone, but write the whole thing as well. And when you've got the whole thing, you can grapple it into shape, because without having the whole book, you've got nothing to sell and nothing to work on. And it's really important to have the whole book. I mean, how many books did you write, Mary, before you got one published?
I've written 3 novels, women's fiction, before I wrote my first whodunit and started working with Boldwood. So I learned a lot, a huge amount, writing those 3 novels, really. And the first one I did when I was at an evening class, creative writing. And I had the most wonderful teacher called Felicity Fair Thompson on the island. And she was just incredibly encouraging, really, because I went into the class with no idea at all, really, no background in any of it. And she just said, like, let's start with a character. And then it was very much, I kept trying to write about different things. And then I thought, well, I'm going to write about something I really care about. And that's how I wrote the first book, Free to be Tegan. And I think that's what I keep saying when I'm writing books is books are long. They're long to write. There's a lot of words. So whatever you do, your first point about writing about what you like, set it in a place you want to be, because you're going to be there 4 months and you're going to be there for long nights thinking about it and reworking things. So have characters that you not necessarily like, but you're interested in. Only 2 days ago, actually, I was sort of working on my next book at the moment, and I had a character, and she was sort of all right. She was piddling around, and I suddenly thought, oh, you're a bit dull. And then I completely, I'm halfway through the book, and this was quite a lot of rewriting, but I completely changed her. And suddenly she's come alive, and I want to write about her. I want to see what she's doing, and I care about her. And I didn't before. I mean, she's not one of the main characters, but it still matters. And very often people will, when they come back to you over a book, actually will say, actually, my favourite character was so-and-so, and they're often not the main character. Do you find that, Della?
Yeah. And often I find my favourite character isn't the same as anyone else's. Yeah. A little bit alarming, because I think we're a bit quirky and wacky. But yes, I know what you mean about rewriting a character halfway through as well, because another really good tip, probably, I don't know if this is something I also don't do, because I just hit the ground running when I write a book. It's easier when you've got established characters if it's a series, but when you begin, I sometimes don't know how they speak. That's the number one thing for me. And so I start off and they're speaking one way, and then as we go through the book, their voice changes and I slowly get into what I think they actually do sound like. And then I have to go back and rewrite every single piece of dialogue they've ever said. That is a right pain. I don't know if anyone has.
I think that's actually what happened with this character. I couldn't hear her. She was just so dull. And then I suddenly imagined her speaking like somebody I heard who I love listening to. And I thought, oh yeah, if she spoke like that, now that would be so. But then that means the whole of her character is different. And she suddenly came alive a bit but as you say, I then had to go right from the start, looking at every bit of dialogue about that she'd done, because she spoke differently. She had sort of become a different person, really. And there's no shortcuts to that sort of thing.
No, it's getting them to come off the page before you put them on the page, if that makes any sense. You've somehow got to have them very firmly set, and my characters aren't necessarily. I'm getting better at that, I hope, but I think that's...
Well, after 17 books, you should be an expert.
I'm not.
Do you think, having said that sort of jokingly, the 17 books, do you still feel like you're still learning new things all the time?
Yeah, and I actually learn a lot, and I'm sure everyone else does, from reading other people's novels. Unfortunately, it wrecks other people's novels for me as well, because the whole time I'm reading, I'm thinking, oh, how did they do that? That's really clever. Oh, let's go back a few pages and see how that... how did they set that up? That kind of thing. It wrecks books, it wrecks films, wrecks television.
And if they're really good, you think, oh, how do you write something as beautiful as that? I want to write something as beautiful as that. It's
we forever learn, don't we? And when I teach my students, and I say to them often that you teach me as much as I teach you. It's a continual learning curve. I love that about writing.
Yeah.
But I think it always will be. I can't imagine ever stopping learning, because you just get deeper and deeper in.
Yeah.
And fashions change, don't they?
Yeah, that's an interesting one, isn't it? Because sometimes I read books that were written quite a long time ago, and they're quite slow. And you think, nobody had ploughed through that many pages of description now. It's you have to be quicker, I think. And I think like what we came back to with the hook, I think the hook becomes more important, because every day there's thousands of books coming out on Amazon, and you want to hook somebody in, and that's fair enough. You want to say, look, this is worth reading. This is what,
I don't know about you, but I am so impatient as a reader, Mary, because I've had to do it as a job for a long time too. When I decide what books I'm going to buy on Amazon, there are other bookshops.
And other bookshops are available. Yeah,
you can get a sample, and I get, I don't know, for every one book I buy, I would have had a sample. I'd have looked at 10 samples, and if their first few pages doesn't draw me in, I won't bother buying the book. I'll just look at the sample. I won't bother buying it, which is a good lesson for me. So I've more and more over the last couple of years, I've tried to make my opening pages, chapters, have more of a hook, because there's a lot. I mean, presumably everyone else out there is doing the same thing as I am, just buying things that actually hook them in. And at least with Rainbows, at least you start with, she's obviously helping a sheep, a ewe to lamb. So you pretty much know what you're going to get. You've got a vet right from page one. So I was quite pleased with that, and I thought that beginning may get changed, but maybe I'm getting better at them, because they didn't change that beginning for once, or didn't ask me to change it. So
how do you get, as somebody, and this is bit selfish because I've only just started writing the series. I'm just writing the second in a series. I've never done a series before, and it seems to me that there's some sort of balance to be had between writing a one-off and a series. So how much, because I think with Rainbows Over Puddleduck Farm, you could just pick that up and read it. You wouldn't need to have read Coming Home. But it's actually, it's nice to have read the other one. And I think if you read Rainbows and love it, then it's certainly worth reading the other one, going back. How do you get the? But you can't. It's not like a drama where it's a straightforward linear progression. You have to have it so that somebody could just pick up Rainbows and read it as a one-off, and yet you've got your readers who've read the book before, who you, in a sense, you want to reward them that they're coming back to characters that they know and love. But and you don't want to sort of have to do all this background again. So how do you get that balance anyway between it, so people will be able to go straight into it, and but also it being a series?
I think Jessica's, I don't know if Jessica Redland is still here, but Jessica Redland is very good at that. And one of the things I think is that when you get to the end, you have to resolve like the main storylines in the book, but you have to have enough of a hook to actually get the readers to go on to the next book. Jessica is still here.
Yeah,
and I've learned that from Jessica. Jessica's really good at that. And I think, so you've got like also though, readers will complain. If they complain that if it's a series, they complain that it's got a cliffhanger and they don't like it. And if it's a standalone, they complain that they want it to be a series. So you can't win.
Yeah.
But I don't think I don't know if I've got that quite right. I never know exactly until obviously people.
Well, I think you've got it bang on right with this one, actually. I think it's lovely because I felt I was coming back to, it wasn't like they were new characters. I felt like I knew Phoebe very well, and Sam and Rufus a bit. And yet I learned new things about them in this book as well. So I think you did it really well, actually. I was looking at it thinking, gosh, that's how you do a series. And as you say, Jessica, Joe Bartlett, they've just got this way of writing a series which you think, oh yeah, they're places you want to go back to.
Yeah, it's hard. It's really hard, I think. And I keep reams and reams of notes, and I'm sure everyone else does who writes the series, because I'm terrified of the continuity bit. I'm terrified of messing it up. Yeah, Jessica's just saying it becomes a bit of trial and error with the amount of backstory. Yes, that's so true. The backstory that you have to pop in.
Yes.
It's really, I mean, for me, I hate reading what's clearly a whole clunky backstory when I'm reading a series book.
Yeah.
And so I try to just put in the tiny little strips of it in between the drama. Yeah, Jessica's right. If that is that sort of backstory essential for this book, if not, then it probably doesn't need covering. That's brilliant advice. Thank you.
A bit of advice. Thank you, Jessica. And Anne said, yes, you've got it just right. That's lovely.
Oh, thank you. Thanks, Anne. I am so relieved, because there's a part of me that's like, oh my God, you know, is this really going to be okay? And I do remember having a conversation with my editor about it, Caroline Ridding, and saying, what do I do? How do I close this? Because prior to writing this one, I'd only ever written books where, although they were series, there was only one main romantic couple. And at the end, they got together, and that was that.
Yeah.
Whereas writing a series you can't really do that, because unless you're going to split them up in the next book or kill off someone or something. So I was a bit flummoxed, to be honest, about how to do it. And it's reading other authors, as always, reading other authors who are at the top of their game. Sophie Kinsella, oh, I can't praise her highly enough, actually. Really? Hello, Claire.
Hi,
Claire. And thank you so much. And thanks, Anne, because that's a relief. I don't know. It's writing's continual trial and error. When I've got to about book 35, I think I might be getting closer to it then. But I think it will always be like this. It will always be just learning and learning and learning.
Do you have any particular book or people that you read about the art of writing that you would recommend?
Stephen King's pretty good, actually. His book on writing is amazing.
It's very, very good, isn't it? Yeah. I don't know where my copy is at the moment. Anybody out there has got my copy? Because I'm always giving it to people saying, read this, it's good. I think what I like about him is that he talks about actual writing. He's not talking about marketing. He's not saying about how you sell your book. It's about the writing. And I think that's really good.
Yeah, there's a lot you can learn. There's an awful lot you can learn from also going to talks as well. I remember going to a talk at Sonic Writers once, a guy called Hugh Ray, and I could have listened to him. He's gone now, I think. I could have listened to him for hours and hours and hours. He picked up what was then Lisa Jewell's first debut novel, I think, her first book. And he was just reading, telling us how to write from looking at this book. And it was all about cutting into scenes really deeply so that you were bang in the middle of a scene, which at the time was quite cutting edge.
Yeah.
And I thought, that's how you do it. Wow. And so you get snippets from everyone, everywhere. Yes. I really think we should all, if we can, go and listen to other writers talking, listen to people who teach, go and listen to agents and editors, read and read and read and read. And I think finally, for me, I'm a slow learner, I think, and it finally sinks in.
Well, I think sometimes we learn the right thing at the right time. And you can hear something one time and it's not fitting in with what you need. And then you read it another time and say, that's what I needed. I think my favourite book is by Anne Lamott. It's called Bird by Bird. And,
yes.
I love it because it's called Bird by Bird because she bases it on something that happened. Let's think, it was her brother. He'd been asked to write a project for school about birds, all the birds in Australia or wherever it was. And he was totally overwhelmed. And his father sat him down and said, stop panicking, just take it bird by bird. And it's like a philosophy of life almost. When we get overwhelmed by things, just take it bird by bird. And I have to say, it has to be one of the most helpful bits of advice I've read or had, because I very frequently get a bit overwhelmed by my plot or my characters or anything. And I think, right, deep breath, bird by bird. So it's a great book, that. And that, again, is about the actual writing, the heart of writing, which is the most important thing. I think, all the other things will follow in a sense. So,
yeah, I've got that book. I so agree with you. Jessica said about being on book 19 and still learning with each one, and that's the thing that keeps it really exciting. And you said earlier, Mary, about the hardest thing about writing. Well, I think for me is when I sit down, knowing I've got a new novel to write, and I've just got a blank page, and that's so hard. I'm just looking at a blank page. It's not a short story which I know is going to be finished tomorrow or this afternoon. It's a novel which is going to be finished in 8 weeks, and I've just got a blank page. That's terrifying, I find. I don't know whether that gets any easier.
Actually, it was Stephen King who said there's nothing more frightening than a blank page, and it is. It's terrifying. But you have filled this book with most beautiful, beautiful stories and words. So, you did it, and I'm sure you're doing it. And you've got another one coming out. The next one in the Puddleduck Farm.
The one I'm writing at the moment. Well, I'm actually slightly. Oh, am I allowed to say I'm behind, just in case my editor's listening? No, I'm bang on. I'm bang on schedule.
Bang on ahead.
Schedule. And it will be done. It will be there. And I did actually say to her yesterday, because I'm coming up towards the end of this book. I'm coming up to 60,000 words, and it's 80 is where I aim for, and then I go back and put bits in. And I said, am I going to be doing another Puddleduck book? And she was like, yes, if you want to. And I'm thinking, yes, I do, I want to. I love writing about her. I love writing about Phoebe. I love being a vet by proxy.
Well, we all love reading about it as well, Della, and I just can't wait for the next one now. So I'm becoming one of these greedy readers who says, quick, when's the next one coming out? Because I love it.
So when is your next one coming out before we?
It'll be in March. Yeah, the next one will be in March. Death at Castle Cove, out in March. So not long now. I'm very excited.
This one, I just started reading it yesterday, actually.
Oh, thank you.
And I am I don't know how you do it. You have this dark suspense, right? I don't know how you do this. I mean, if ever I wrote Cozy Crumb, I'm going to come and get lessons and study your books, because it just creeps through, and I don't know how you're making me feel like this little shiver down my spine. It's quite sinister, and you've got to carry on reading. I don't really know what you're doing. I don't know how do you do that?
I don't know. I know it sounds a bit mundane, but I do a lot of plotting before I start, and I think it's because I think having to build up that sense of suspense, starting with it fairly cozy, and then and I think the plotting maybe helps me try and do that. I think so.
I don't do any plotting. That's where I'm going wrong, obviously.
I think it's different sorts of books. I think for something like crime, a whodunit really, because you're going to have all these suspects, you've got all their clues and all these things to feed in and out of different days. I am sure there are people who can hold it all in their heads, but I'm not one of them. So I plot, then I write, then I go back to plot, then I write. I don't know. That's the way I have to do it. So.
Interesting. No, I can't wait to it. I've only just started reading it because I've only just got it. Because obviously it's not out yet, but I can't wait for it to be out. Thanks, Carol. Thanks. Just say thank you. And there you go. Jan reads both of our books. Thanks, Jan. Thank you very much.
Right. Well, I think we've actually overrun.
Oh, have we?
Did we go over a few minutes? But that's okay. It's just been up. And thank you so much. There's so many people have popped in and out and have come, and thank you so much. And Lindsay, thank you for coming, even though you were a bit late, and that doesn't matter at all. It was so lovely. And Carol and Nikki and anybody I've missed, I'm so sorry, because I keep nipping over and I've seen all the names. And thank you so much for coming, and thank you so much, Della, for chatting about your book.
Thank you so much, Mary. As always, it's delightful to talk to you, and I forget that there's anyone watching, but there obviously are. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everybody else. Bye-bye then.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.